Your brain is plastic, and that's a good thing. Our memory is really a gateway to the past. And as we age, it might be, in some circumstances, the only thing we have left of a person or of a thing. And so I just want to lay the groundwork for why memory is such an important thing to try to preserve. I did inherit my grandma's sewing machine after she passed away from a stroke, and that inspired me to become a speech language pathologist. These two things come together in this really cool way that can help our cognition now and in the future. I have gone to patients' rooms, specifically in adult care settings, and we'll be talking about pictures that they have on their wall, and they might be saying, I know that this person is important, but I can't tell you who they are. And they will ask me, is that my daughter? The parts of our brain that we are stimulating when we are crafting, especially when we are using two hands and even crossing our hands over to the other direction, we are recruiting more brain power when we are using two hands bilaterally. And that's something we do a lot in crafting. If you are knitting, if you are crocheting, if you are sewing, woodworking, when your hands are crossing over, you are recruiting a lot of different parts of your brain, of your nervous system, to get into motion so that you can perform these activities. I came across one specific study, The Art of Remediating Age-Related Decline. Such a good title. This article was talking about how in adults with mild cognitive impairment, art therapy has been shown to improve their executive functioning. Now, executive functioning is something that we all need to use every day. Think about those basic skills that you use to schedule a doctor's appointment, to put something into your calendar, to problem solve. This is where executive functioning comes in. This study was done over a 12-week span, and it put people into two different groups. All of the people had what you would call mild cognitive impairment. Now, at first that might sound alarming, but the reality is mild cognitive impairment is pretty common. This is what the typical person might say, oh, my memory seems to be slipping. A little further than that, when your cognition seems to be declined, but you are not at the point where you have some sort of degenerative disease that would affect your memory. That was kind of the group that this study took. They split these people into two different groups, and over a 12-week span, one set of people, the test group, underwent 45 minutes a week of art therapy. This is very low intensity therapy. And the other group did not undergo any art therapy. What they found over a 12-week span was the test group had improved working memory. So the memory that it takes to perform tasks and retain information and then use that information to perform a task or perform a verbal conversation. They had an improvement in immediate memory. But the coolest thing is that they were actually shown on their brain scans to have grown in a part of the brain. They grew in the right frontal middle gyrus part of their brain. Now, what does that mean? That is a part of our brain that can interrupt attention so that we can move on to attending to a different thing. So in the therapy world, when someone is super obsessed with something and they keep returning to that conversational point, we call that perseveration. So if someone is perseverating on something, they keep telling you that their lunch was late and it fell on the ground. My lunch was late and it fell on the ground. And they say this over and over and over. If they are not able to kind of break that line of thinking and move on to something else, they might be inhibited in this area of the brain that allows them to break their attention from one thing and move on to the other thing. But what this study showed is that the people who participated in this weekly art therapy, they grew in that specific area of the brain, which is amazing. That would mean that their ability to have alternating attention would have been improved. A second study that was done over 4 weeks took 57 patients that had post-stroke executive function disorder. Executive function is what allows us to do a lot of our daily tasks, things like scheduling a doctor's appointment, managing a schedule, problem solving. So it took 57 patients who had difficulties in this area after having a stroke, and they all received the same amount of physical therapy, and they all received the same amount of occupational therapy, but the control group had a more traditional occupational therapy approach that focused on things like flexibility, mobile flexibility. And the second group had trained occupational therapists who took an art or a more artistic therapy approach. So they focused on things like cutting papers and calligraphy and painting. The group that was doing the more artistic and creative approach was found to have more improved executive functioning skills at the end of that 4 weeks, even though all the people in these groups were undergoing the same minutes of therapy. One more study that I read and that I will share, of course, in the description was one that commented on self-care after a stroke. And it did talk about the depression that people can fall into after a stroke. I do want to say, at the risk of making this conversation too clinical, I am close to people who struggle with very deep depression, and I have treated patients who are so depressed after having a brain injury. Depending on the severity of the stroke, you can see so much of what you had planned for your life seems to be gone now. You can feel like you are a burden to your family. Your ability to participate in activities is severely decreased in some cases, and these things can lead to so much depression. And so while this title seems simple and honestly a bit obvious, self-care is good for you after a stroke, I don't necessarily know that someone needs to be told that. I'm not sure, is that very helpful? I don't know. But I just want to highlight that depression after a stroke or after a brain injury is super prevalent. But I want to call out that crafting can give you a purpose. It can add to your identity instead of just suddenly being the stroke survivor or the traumatic brain injury survivor, the person who was in a motorcycle accident. You can add to that identity by being the person who paints or the person who is trying to learn to sew again. Crafting can really give you something to look forward to, and it can, again, become a positive part of who you are. I want to talk specifically about people who are trying to return to some sort of crafting after a brain injury. I want to talk about how that might change and certain things that might be helpful to get back to the best that they can be. The first thing I want to call out is that it's really important to remember that in order to build any sort of memory, we first need two things to precede that. We first need alertness, and then we need attention, and then we are able to build and develop memories. So before you go into your crafting room, or honestly even enter into a conversation where you want to really be able to contribute, you first need to be alert, and then you need to have attention, and then you can begin to develop and participate well in that situation. Some tips I would give to people who might have a brain injury or their attention might be just divided. Honestly, these would be great for people with ADHD too. Is one, walking in nature can really help. If you are not able to get out and go for a walk, even staring out the window and focusing your eyes on something in nature has been shown to help with developing memory. If you engage in something right after that, that is a cognitive task. Number two, think about what you are listening to during your craft time. Studies have shown that our focus can be improved if we are listening to certain types of binaural beats, they're called. My favorite channel, I'm not, connected with them at all, but Endel, I like to just listen to their music if I am really trying to zone in and focus. This might not be necessary for everyone. Some people can watch movies, and maybe you used to be able to watch movies while you did these activities, but you have to remember that we just need to reduce distractions, at least for a time being, as we return and try to relearn some of these activities. On that same note, reduce distractions. I would really suggest approaching your crafting time in a low clutter area, maybe turning the lights down low or changing the light bulb to a more calming light instead of something bright that might be distracting. Taking off an Apple Watch, turning your phone off, and leaving your phone in the other room. It might not have been necessary to reduce all these distractions before a brain injury, but after a brain injury, sometimes that is the case, and it is necessary. I would really recommend that you stay social. It's easier said than done, but staying social has been shown to have a lot of cognitive benefits, including benefits on your memory. So if there is some sort of crafting club that you can join, there's even specific crafting clubs for brain injury survivors that I found online throughout certain states and cities. So if that's something that you are able to join in on, I think it would be such a great opportunity to maintain that cognition and memory, as well as connect with other people who have gone through the same thing. The next thing I would say is that your mindset does matter. Studies have shown that the way that you mentally approach your rehabilitation can actually contribute to differences in outcomes. If you have a positive mindset, that can change your outcomes and success in your therapies and in your day-to-day activities. If you have a negative mindset about what you're doing, that could have a negative impact. There was this really interesting study done where it took two groups of people and they were all given a smoothie. But one group of people was told that the smoothie was a typical fattening smoothie that had sugar in it. The other group of people was told that it was healthy. They all had the same ingredients, but their health scans, the way that they went back and they tested areas in their body that would have changed based on if you were eating something healthy or not, that test group who was told they were having something healthier, their brain actually registered, I think it was less glucose or something like that. It was, I'll put the link in the description. But the overall takeaway is that the things that you believe about what you are doing can change the way that your body interacts with what you're doing. So just keep that in mind. That absolutely blew my mind when I heard about that study. The last thing I would say is use memory strategies. There is unfortunately no magic fix to memory, but we can use strategies, and the biggest strategy would be writing. Write things down. Use a sort of memory log. Use a book that keeps track of your crafting. Use an approach, an elimination process approach. Let's say you're making a quilt. Cross off that you bought your fabric. Cross off that you have cut out your pieces. Keep your things in the same place. Writing things down. I know it sounds obvious, but again, it might be something that you hadn't had to do before and now you have to do it. And that is okay. I always say to my patients, it's okay if you don't remember everything, even today's date. If you don't remember today's date off the top of your head, that's fine. It's more important that you know where to look for that information. I am a lot more concerned if I see a patient who doesn't know how to look at their phone to find today's date than that they just didn't know it off the top of their head. If you are a techie, there is an app called Seamwork. I use that myself to keep track of my sewing projects. All the information is there for you, including a place to put in the pattern that you're using, the fabric you're using, where you bought it, and any notes. It is a nice way to keep track of things. I do want to keep in mind that this is also a way for family to keep track of things. If we are needing more help, if you have a family member or a caregiver who could help you out in the area of your crafting, then writing things down would be really helpful for them. This is kind of hyper specific, but if you are having difficulties in the area of word finding, I just want to plug the idea that you can talk around the word that you're trying to say. So if you can't really think of the word quilt, but you might be able to say that large fabric piece that's colorful and pieced together on the bed. Talk about the location, what it's used for, what it reminds you of, and those things can trigger the word coming to your mind. Another thing that I would say if you are having trouble with word finding is you get your whole body involved. If you are trying to say the word sewing machine, but you can't quite get it out, mimic what you do on that. maybe tap your foot, move your hands through the machine. Getting your whole body involved can really help trigger that word. I want to just plug, and I'll put in the link below, a video that I watched about a woman named Karen Thatcher who had a brain injury, and she has gone on to be an amazing quilter, continue quilting. I think she was quilting before the brain injury, but she's even won awards. It was a really cool video showing that even after a brain injury, someone can still persist and do things that maybe they thought they weren't even capable of. Last but not least, if you know someone who was unable to finish some sort of arts project, creative project because of a disability or because of death, there is this foundation called Loose Ends that actually connects people to others who are contributing their time to finish projects that someone wasn't able to do. I will include this. I think that this is such a cool thing. I really hope that more people are able to find out about this. I hope all of this information was helpful to at least one person. If you have specific questions, please let me know. I thought about making this video for a long time, and I thought, I don't know if there's an audience for it, but honestly, this video was inspired because I recently met a patient who quilted, and she was unable to tell me about it, but through some back and forth communication strategies, I was able to find out she was a quilter. I like to sew, and so we ended up having sort of a disjointed conversation. But this whole video was kind of inspired by her, because I know there's at least one person out there who wanted to get back to this activity, and I'm sure there's many more. If you know someone who's hoping to get back, please share this video with them, with hopefully some strategies that could be helpful. And if you have some strategies that have helped you recover, or you are just excited about the way that creativity helps your brain, please comment below. I would love to know. I hope to make more videos like this, so please subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you next time. Thank you.